During the day, you had to be on the street because you had to show people you weren't afraid, even if you were. So we were always out during the day. And one day it was getting dark, you know, and we started to see the cars come by the office. And this looked a little different than when Sam used to walk out and get beat up. And so we cut out all the lights, and we checked out how we could get out of the building. And the next thing we know, we hear noise on the steps, running up the steps. So we go out the back window onto a roof, and we were in a 2-story building. We then go out the back window and go onto the roof, and then there was I just jumped. There was a TV antenna on the roof, and so I think Guyot grabbed that, Sam grabbed that, and we hit the ground and took off. And we knew where we were going. We had a house to go to. And we had to take a kind of circuitous route because when we went out of the building, there was a guy that saw us. He was a black guy, and I don't know what he was doing out there, but we decked him. One of us did. And kept going and got to the house where we were, and they let us in, and then we just kind of all huddled in the same room. So that night we got away. I think we went to Amsey's house. Cleveland. Went up to Cleveland, and there was a whole discussion about going back. So Bob came down, Bob Moses and Amsey Moore and a whole bunch of people came down to the office, and it was wrecked. They had just thrown the files around. We don't know what they took, but the office was a disaster. And then we had to have a discussion, well, do we stay here or not? So for the first few nights, what we did was we would stay in Greenwood during the day and then go back up to Cleveland at night till we found another place to be. But that was one scary place. Greenwood was real serious about hurting people.
Casey Hayden came to the campus and was recruiting for the summer project, and I was involved with the student political organization on campus called SPAC and Student Political Action Committee, and then also sort of the incipient STS at that point. And after I heard the presentation, I knew that I wanted to go. And I think I started to fill out my application right away. Took it very seriously. And I was accepted into the project and went to the training in Oxford. I was in the second group, so I was in Oxford at the point that we heard about Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney missing. And I was committed to go down. We went down on the bus and we stayed first in Ruleville with Mrs. Hamer. And then we went from Ruleville to Shaw, which is a small town. And it was a remarkable experience for me because so many things were new. I wasn't used to a rural area. I wasn't used to being in an all-black community, and to protect the white students, it really was, they really wanted us not to go into the white areas. We heard a little about the White Folks Project and actually wondered, is that something we should do? And they said, no, it's too dangerous for you there. My self-awareness about issues that led to the development of a women's movement really struck me more by the time I came back to the university in '65, though I had read Casey and Mary King's paper during that summer, because it was one of the things we all passed around. And also, there was a lot of discussion about relations between men and women, and how come the women were making the coffee and taking the notes. In so many ways, much of the bedrock of the movement were the women.
But we got to the meeting, and all the SNCC organizers and the field secretaries were there. And the issue was that Sammy Young Jr. had gotten involved in quite a scuffle at the registrar of voters' office that day before trying to register voters. And he was upset about it, and SNCC people were upset, and so they were planning to go to that voter registration office the next day to bring more registrants in. And that's what the meeting was all about. It was about planning it and sort of debriefing Sammy on what happened. But he asked me if I wanted a ride back to the campus. But he told me, he said, Michael, he said, I've got to drive through town first. And I said, well, I appreciate it, but someone else would offer me a ride. Well, the next morning, I found Sammy had gotten shot. He was in an argument with a man who owned a service station in Tuskegee, and he wanted to use the bathroom, and the man wouldn't let him use the bathroom. It was for whites only, and they had an argument, and next thing we hear is that the man shot Sammy right through his head. Well, that upset everybody, and there were lots of demonstrations, and then a lot of SNCC people poured in. So I got to pretty much know people that I would know for the next 40 years or 50 years with that. And in 2 weeks or so, when the demonstrations went by, I started voter registration right where Sammy Young was, in registering voters in the north of Tuskegee and east of Tuskegee.
I had left college, Tougaloo College, and decided I dedicated my life to fighting discrimination. Going back to why I became involved in the movement was because of my early realization in Mississippi that I was being discriminated against. It wasn't overt. I didn't live on a plantation, but I wanted more. I wanted to see more of the world. And I remember going in Crest's dime store, and I loved this peanut brittle candy that they made, and chocolate-covered peanuts.
Me too.
Oh, yes. And it was Woolworths. So I looked forward to that. And they had the counter serving the Cokes and so forth, but we had to stop after we got our candies and go out the door because we couldn't sit at the counter. It didn't really make me angry, but I felt that I should have been able to sit there.
I think it's very important to know that it was very big to join the NAACP. In the South, Black people were always looking for ways to participate in doing something about the conditions we lived in. And if you're talking about when SNCC arrived in Albany, that's fall '61. That is after the Supreme Court decision, that's after the murder of Emmett Till, that is after the Montgomery bus boycott, that is after Central High School. Those things took place where they did, but they took place in our lives. And those things were rearranging us and what we thought was possible. I thought I would die if the movement didn't come to Albany. When Arthurine Lucy went to the University of Alabama, I went with her every day. It was Fantasyland. I didn't even know what fantasy was. But I went to the University of Alabama with Arthurine Lucy, and she said something. I think she might have had a bit of a mouth, or she said something. They put her out. And Thurgood Marshall made them take her back. I went back with her. And then they started to say, she was getting threatened. It was very dangerous. They had to put her out. So they put her out a second time. I'm waiting for Thurgood Marshall to get her back in so we could go back. And she didn't go back. She married a minister and they went to Texas. That was not in my plan. I said, oh my God, I guess if I'm gonna be in the movement, I have to go for myself. I can't do it in my fantasy land. But I'm trying to describe how big this period of the 50s were for us. And they were things that didn't necessarily take place in your town, but they took place in your life. And you just felt something was coming. Emmett Till meant children could be killed. This time, we would not have to wait until we were grown to participate. That's the way it felt. in Montgomery, there are two groups of people who rode the bus, students and poor working people. Every black person who could put together $20 drove a car. The ministers who ran the Montgomery bus boycott did not ride on the bus. They drove cars. I mean, when they integrated the bus and they got on the bus, it was probably the first time they rode on the bus. The bus was for students, and so students got off the bus. They were participants. So I really thought this time, you know, we were going to be a part of this thing. And, you know, there was nothing like Greensboro. Those were freshmen. That's 1960. Mm-hmm. In 1960, if you're a freshman, you're about, say, 6, 7 months from graduating from high school. 59, we had reformed the youth council in ACP, and I was the secretary of the chapter. So when SNCC came to Albany, student government had been suspended because we had already started to have activities sufficient that the administration, and we were organizing through the student government. They canceled the student government. And at the same time we're coming back, Dean Asbury is no longer there. We don't have student government. And Charles Sherrod and Cordell Regan came to Albany. And they had come, Sherrod had come from Petersburg. Cordell was in high school. He was the youngest SNCC field secretary. He'd come out of high school. He was in the city movements. They'd both been trained by Jim Lawson. They both went on the Freedom Rides. They'd both done time in Parchman. When they came to Albany, we were very ready and already doing something. But it's hard to express or articulate the difference between the little stuff we were trying to do and what it meant to have Cordell and Sherrod. They were there first, and they were joined by Charles Jones. The difference in expertise was tremendous. The first thing they did, we had to have nonviolent workshops. And I thought SNCC was just about the worst name I had ever heard. And they said, we're field secretary. First, field secretary. I said, what is a field secretary? We're field secretaries of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I said, what? I said, can you change the name? Student Nonviolent. I could get to that a little bit, even though I didn't know it. But coordinating and committee, what kind of organization is that? And we just were a long way. And it's like SNCC is formed in 1960, and this is fall of 1961, and they were so far ahead of us in terms of what they had already moved. So SNCC was like probably one of the fastest moving organizations in terms of teaching itself how to do what they were doing.